So before the break, we briefly discussed what was happening at that period. And it's quite important to point out at this time, as I said, Sikhs were very, very loyal to India. They felt that it was their ancestors, it was their khun, it was their blood and their sacrifices that built India. All Sikhs ever asked for were human rights. So where did this notion of Khalistan actually come from? Really, now we look back 25 years later, there was so much confusion. Media was saying so many things, people were saying so many things, so many vested interests. And now, as many of them people who were decision makers at that time become retired and started writing books, we get access to a lot more information at that time. And really what's coming out through a lot of books and a lot of things, people's memoirs of that period who were working in the Indian government, they come out and they point to us that the actual notion of Khalistan did not come from Sikhs at all. It was actually done by the Indian intelligence sources and the right-wing media to demonize the Sikhs as anti-Indian movement, despite the huge sacrifices that Sikhs and their unwavering loyalty to India. So really, these people were only asking for a Punjabi Suba and asking for some fundamental rights, but instead they were turned into separatists and turned into extremists with a set agenda that they will be demonized and that basically that people will move away from them. And that's exactly what we saw that happened. And the media and the people behind this were very successful in doing that. If we look at the reality, Sikhs did not mention Khalistan. In fact, some individuals might have, as individuals, but en masse Sikhs didn't. It was only after Operation Blue Star and the carnage of Delhi, the organized genocide that happened in Delhi, it was only after that time that the loyalty of Sikhs to India changed. And Sikhs started thinking to themselves, if this genocide is going to be brought upon us, despite all our loyalties to India, then we really need to reflect. Do we need an independent state? And it was at that time Sikhs started talking about this. But we will discuss that further in other lectures. Baba Janel Singh at that time was a person who was pivotal. And it was this demonization was done mainly of himself. So let's look at what exactly he was saying. And was he really a person who was asking to be separate? Because the impression that we get from his own quotes is that no, he wanted to be part of India and he wanted to coexist. In fact, if we look at this, his own speeches, he was quite astonished when this claim was put to him. And I take again from his talks. He stated, I do not wish to discuss independent Khalistan, etc. He says, I do not wish to discuss it because it has nothing to do with our Morcha. When pressed on the subject, he stated, I am neither for or against Khalistan. Asking for it is not our demand. However, if the government feels it cannot accommodate our just aspirations in India and offers us a separate homeland, then we will not refuse it like we did in 1947. So quite clearly, he was just saying that we are asking for our fundamental rights. But if you cannot give us them justice, if you cannot give us them fundamental rights, then really we have to consider this. But we never asked for it, and it's not our demand. And this is where we fundamentally go, because this backdrop is really important when we discuss 1984. At 10 p.m. tonight, this whole lecture is going to be shown in full. In that lecture, we will discuss what actually happened on this day. But we will discuss it not from an opinion point of view, because the reality of the emotions of these things is that people have bias. And you do have bias from people who are Sikh, who are pro-Khalistani, etc. And you also have people that are loyal to India, and they have their own bias. And so if I was to present you one perspective or another, people will say that he's with them or he's with them. And the reality is that it's very important for us as the next generation to find truth in what is really going on. And therefore we must look at the facts. So when looking at this, I thought it's really important. Let's move all the emotions out the way, and let's move all the bias out the way. And let's just look at people from independent sources. So the best way that we consider to do that is let's look at people like The Times, The Guardian, and the press that were independent outside of India and see what they have to say. And tonight we're going to go into a lot more detail about what these people are saying, directly quoting from the papers of that time. And then, like I said before, it's up for everyone else to make their own opinions and look at this. But while we discuss this, like I said before, even tomorrow there's going to be a march in London. I think it's very important for Sikhs, if we have a cause, if we have something that we want to portray, it's really important that we put it forward in a way that people can understand. The reality is, I've always felt this for a number of years, that burning flags, etc., making fiery speeches, especially in Punjabi, which very few people who are there rarely understand. I really didn't see the point of that. I think it's very important that people put forward a message that wrong has been done to Sikhs, and Sikhs just want reconciliation and they want justice. I think it's really important that that comes across, and that has to come across from our behaviour. Our behaviour is very, very important. Our behaviour should be that we are a reasonable people and we have reasonable demands. And them demands were put in front of the Indian government, and instead, while they gave them reasonable demands to every other state in India, they didn't to Punjab. And especially, they targeted the Sikhs. And we are upset at that. Our loyalty that we gave to this country was thrown away, and it was disregarded. And instead, helicopter gunships, etc., were used on our Pavitra Darbar Sahib, and there was no need for this at all. There was no need for any of the genocide that happened to us. And really, it's important for us to really look at this. So recapping, because I don't want to go on to the 84 thing until tonight at 10 o'clock, because that is in its own, it's a whole subject in itself. But looking back, just to go over just what we've discussed today, the reality is this: Sikhs made a huge mistake in 1947. We may look back, and in hindsight we may think that maybe it is better, we should have had our independent state. Who knows how that would have turned out. Personally, I feel we would have done very well out of that. If we are successful in UK, in Canada, and every other part of the world, there's no reason why we couldn't be successful there. The reality is we sit here today because of the lack of opportunities that our parents had at that time. If them opportunities were there, and then policies weren't used against us, maybe we would all be sitting there and would be highly successful there. The reality is that Sikhs, over a long period of time, went to the Indian government and said to him, these promises that you made, have the dignity to come and fulfill them promises. And these were not. Instead, Punjab was further divided time and time again. Despite all the protests for human rights, them human rights were abused further. To the point that though every single person who was loyal to India would accept that the Sikhs that spoke up in 1975 against the dictatorship of Prime Minister Indira Gandhi were doing nothing wrong at that time. And instead, that's when this program against the Sikhs came across. And it led to 1978, the Rankari Kand, where Tera Singhs were shaheed and many more were injured. And then afterwards, further in Delhi and many others, as again we will discuss. During that time in Punjab, we look at, there was not anarchy as is portrayed in much of this thing. The statistics display that themselves. Then in other states there was far more anarchy. And really, Sikhs, especially Baba Janel Singh, was being completely demonized in that way. And this was done by a set agenda. And when we look at the media reporting of 1984, the media picks up on this themselves. And they put out, when we will put forward quotes from all these people who say why this was done and what was the purpose behind it. So again, this will come on at 10 o'clock tonight. One binti, that's important that a voice, an independent voice, becomes heard. And that's why things like the Sikh channel, I would urge everyone to support this. Because then us as the next generation, we can really discuss these things. Not just 84, but discuss many things that are important to our community. Whether it be even things like dementia, even in things like environmentalism, even in things like our prospects as people growing up in UK. Many subjects we can discuss. And therefore, I would urge everyone to support this channel. And we will carry on and we will go in much more detail at 10 o'clock tonight. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa.